Tyler Flatt here, host of the Daily Dose of Latin and Associate Professor of Humanities at Boyce College here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the Greek and Hebrew and Latin for Life conference that's coming up here in town. We're very excited to welcome you and to enjoy good fellowship with you as we talk about the importance of studying the biblical languages, and as we relish together all the light that they can shed, not only on our own understanding of the scriptures and our study of them, but also on the history and traditions of the Western Church, and in particular as the Latin branch in the trifecta. That's something that I'm going to be focusing on in my contributions to the conference. As far as the languages of Scripture are concerned, one might wonder, in what sense is Latin a biblical language? That's a great question. It's one that we've gotten more than once, arriving in the Daily Dose of Latin inbox. And it does require a little bit of explanation. So probably you know that none of the autographs of the Old or New Testament books were in Latin. They were in Greek and in Hebrew and in places in Aramaic. None of them were in Latin. Nevertheless, in the days of the Roman Empire, particularly in the 1st century AD and thereafter, the biblical texts were increasingly translated into Latin, not all at once at the beginning, but probably piece by piece for the occasional practical use of individual congregations of Christians whose first language was Latin throughout the Roman Empire. And that begins a whole long tradition of reading and studying and talking about the Bible in the Latin language that lasts all the way nearly into the modern period. Now, we're not going to get into the whole history of the Latin language. I mean, I would love to, but we would run out of videotape probably if we did that. But suffice it to say, the Latin language outlived the Roman Empire and went on to play a really important role in the history of Europe and in the history, really, of the world, and particularly in the history of theology and in the history of the traditions of the Western churches. We might note also that even in the times of Martin Luther and John Calvin in the Reformation era, the Bible in Latin, at that point the Biblia Sacra Vulgata, which we call the Vulgate today, was the primary means for many learned people of encountering the scriptures. Even Luther and Calvin themselves, though of course they could read Greek and Hebrew, they often chose to read the Latin Vulgate for a variety of reasons. One is because it's what they had known as far as encountering the Bible from a very young age, and it still held a lot of cultural currency in their day. And of course, long after their time, even that was true. So one of my goals at this conference, in addition to meeting some of you and hearing your stories of how the study of the biblical languages has shaped your ministries and your lives, is to help give some sense of how the study of Latin can provide a really rich resource, not only for understanding the Bible as it was experienced by so many people throughout the history of our civilization for more than 1,000 years, but also how we can understand and profit from the tradition of commentary on the Bible in Latin, theological dispute in Latin on the Bible. Some of you may know that Martin Luther's 95 Theses were written originally in Latin when they were posted, which of course was a very momentous event in the history of Europe and in the history of Western Christendom. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of the importance of Latin for a historical perspective, not only on the great important figures in the history of the Western churches, but also for the experience of ordinary folks in the Western tradition as they encountered the Bible as well. So I'm excited to see you there. I'm excited to discuss these things with you and also to learn from you, and I'll look forward to seeing you there.